Can you learn anything about your rights from an American comedian? I know you can, on this episode of Unbillable. Is it just me, or are more people voicing their political opinions than usual? More of my friends are posting their opinions on reopening schools, the upcoming elections, and even the latest Karen caught on camera. All these posts seem to boil down to the same announcement about rights. I have the right to this, you have no right to that. Actually, this topic came up because I see people thinking their First Amendment rights are infringed because Instagram or Twitter deletes a post. More on that later, but with rights seemingly all over social media, I thought I would share my truth and an awkward personal admission that my understanding of rights really wasn't forged in law school or from reading government treatises. Instead, the best explanation of rights I ever heard came from a comedian that my parents liked, George Carlin. He was born in the Bronx, New York in May of 1937. I say was because he passed away June 22nd, 2008, but like any brilliant thinker, his legacy remains. Probably most widely known for a 1972 comedy routine called 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television, he was a brilliant comedian and the first host of a then unknown TV show called Saturday Night Live. He was an author and an actor. He even earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I could go on, but you have Google or Wikipedia, and if you want to learn more about George Carlin, you know what to do. Anyways, he starts his jokes about rights by asking, where do your rights come from? Think about it. Where did you get your rights? The rights you hold so dear, where did they come from? Let me jump in for a second and just say, I love the starting point. The source of the power is important when determining how that same power was intended to be used. Most often, however, when someone questions the source of your rights, the common response is God. You know, God-given rights. I don't poke fun here like Carlin does, but instead, I ask you to consider if the rights provided match up with the rights you truly believe God would have provided to Americans. Don't you think God would have given you the right to food? Maybe given you the right to water? The right to shelter? Don't you think God would have done more for an individual's existence? Raised the standards of the needy instead of a right to bear arms or a right to a speedy trial? I think you can see the cracks forming in God-given rights, but let's just go with it. Assume God gave us, and when I say us, you know, we mean Americans, these rights. Then ask yourself, why would God give us Americans just 10 of them? Like, why limit it to only 10 rights? Plus, how good could God's 10 rights be when we, humans, we had to amend those rights because he forgot some important things, like ending slavery? Seems worthy of correction to George Carlin, and it seems worthy of correction to me. Never mind all that, though. God gave us 10 rights. Did you know the British got 13? The Germans were given 29 rights. God supposedly gave the Belgians 25, and 6 to the Swedish. Then some people have none. No rights at all. See, George Carlin asks in his routine, and I'm going to ask you, why would God give different people different rights? Different people from different countries, not just a different number of rights, but all kinds of different types of rights too? It doesn't make much sense to Carlin, and it doesn't make much sense to me. Carlin didn't think it sounded like anything other than humans trying to control other humans. And to be honest, it's scary to think of how right he sounds. See, if this isn't enough for you yet, again, you can go back to your computer. Carlin encouraged his audience to look up Japanese Americans 1942 and to learn everything you need to know about American rights right there. I mean, it's no secret back then. Over 100,000 Japanese Americans were put in internment camps for nothing more than their ancestry. In other words, their appearance. The only right they had was the right to go to the internment camp. And the very moment those Americans needed their rights, the government took them away. You call those God-given rights? Carlin eloquently points out rights aren't rights when someone else can take them away. You see, George Carlin says you don't have rights, you have privileges. A list of privileges that is getting shorter by the day, and eventually, according to Carlin, you will realize the government actually doesn't care about you. The government doesn't care about your safety or your kids or your education. Instead, it cares about itself and its wealth and its power. George Carlin, the great American philosopher of comedy, he makes clear either we have unlimited rights or we have no rights at all. Which way do you think it is? Do you think we have rights? Do you think you have rights? Do you know where those rights come from? Do you agree with his all rights or no rights conclusion? I started this episode with a dismissive take on those who feel their First Amendment rights are being infringed when Instagram or Twitter just deletes their posts. So let me hit this one head on. This isn't a First Amendment issue. This isn't speech being limited by the government. It's a limitation imposed by a private party on their private property. Here, the party being the social media platform itself, and their property being the servers storing, holding, posting that information. So while you have a right to bear arms, you don't have a right to bear arms in an airplane. Rights, to the extent they exist at all, right, George Carlin, can be limited where a legitimate government interest is at stake, and the restriction is the least restrictive means to address the legitimate government purpose. I'm Amir Afsar, a California licensed attorney, and I encourage you to add your 2 cents to this conversation in the comments below, to subscribe by clicking over there, or smash the button right down there to catch another episode, and I'll see you over there.